Ending the week strong here with another off-season Q&A. We're talking NFL draft. We're talking free agency. We're talking salary cap, which only goes in one direction, Croc, and is going up once again in 2025. What does that mean for the San Francisco 49ers? Coming at you right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love all our everydayers out there. Let us know you stopped by. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube at the thumbs up. And if you're new to the program, definitely subscribe. Hang out with us all off-season long as we break down the NFL draft, free agency, trade options, and get involved in one of these Q&A sessions that we do every single week here at BD Peacock at Crocky209, or drop something in the YouTube comments and get involved here with Locked On 49ers. Croc, let's jump into this thing. Salary cap. Reports of the salary cap going up. Another $20+ million, $280 or so million, give or take $1 million or so. The exact number still not out there, but the salary cap is going up, and it's got the 49ers fans in all frenzy about, more money to spend, right? Drew Dahlman, a center, is out there. Brock Purdy, does this mean he's going to get more money? Does this mean it doesn't matter how much the 49ers pay Brock Purdy? And I think I'll put it this way, Croc. Find me someone who's good with their money, and what do they not do? They don't spend everything they get on payday, right? If you get an extra $20, what do? Run to the local slot machine and slap it in there, right? Just because you got a little extra dollars in your pocket doesn't mean you have to spend it right now on the most and everything possible. So I will say that a little bit different. Your personal banking account is a little bit different than what the 49ers and NFL teams are dealing with as far as budgets and salary caps and all that go. What are your thoughts on the salary cap going up? And here, let me. I want to go down this road really quick here with you, Croc, because do you think this? Because obviously NFL teams are doing quite well for themselves, right? Salary cap's going. Do you think the salary cap could and should go up to the point where teams aren't even paying to the salary cap? Like, you might have a handful of teams that don't even get to the cap, so let alone they don't need to do all this shenanigans with restructuring and making sure they can get under the cap, because right now everyone pays up to the cap just about, and different teams do it different ways. But the cap should go up to the point where it's like every team doesn't necessarily pay to the cap, and if you don't have the guys, you don't need to be bumping your head up against the salary cap. Doesn't that seem like the way it should be, rather than every single team trying to circumvent it in some way?
Yeah, but when you look at the 49ers, they definitely have had a lot of guys that they've had to pay and figure different things out, maneuver things. I mean, just trying to fit a roster under the cap has made it more difficult for the 49ers to get rid of certain players, right? Like, they just restructured guys last season. Then you get Deebo Samuel. There was somebody who asked in the questions in the Q&A about, like, one of the juiciest things that we have heard that either we wanted to tell later or something. There's something with Deebo. I can't say anything just yet. I don't know if I ever will. If it comes out, I'll say something about it. But I don't even know where I was going with that part about it. But I was talking about Deebo and kind of fitting him under the cap and maneuvering different things. And all of a sudden, you want to get rid of him this year. It just makes things just a little bit more difficult. You continue to kind of kick that can down the road. I mean, that put the New Orleans Saints in cap hell. So I think increasing it is awesome. You know, they do that every year, and it may help you, sign a couple extra players or pay more to some of the guys that you do have. And that was one of the things with even Brock Purdy. And we've talked a lot about Brock Purdy's contract, but if you pay Brock Purdy today the same amount that Tua got paid, or the same amount that Jordan Love got paid, yeah, you're paying him the same amount, but against your cap, it's a lower percentage of your cap. So, from that standpoint, I think it should be used for things like that, to kind of just make sense of certain things, as opposed to, okay, we just got to go all in and empty the clip and pay every dollar to someone. Make the right moves too. I mean, look at the Hargraves thing. They paid a lot of money to Hargraves, and it was cool. You got a little bit of cap space. Okay, let's go get Hargraves. That didn't quite work out. So can they figure out a way to where they use it almost like in an emergency, like an emergency fund. I think last year, 49ers are going to trade Brandon Ayuk. And I always talked about how they kind of gave themselves they kind of worked against themselves with the trade when they chose to do it, because now you're not going to have as many options out there. If you would have done it at the start of training camp, or excuse me, at the start of the new season, well, now a bunch of teams would have had their hand in that pot, because, well, we haven't been put money towards all these different things or different players, or we haven't addressed the receiver position. But when they were going to trade him in training camp, by that time, there were a few teams that still had kind of this emergency fund to where it's like, well, yeah, we could still make it work. So is there a player out there where come training camp, 49ers may say, you know what, dang, that guy's up for trade. We weren't expecting that, but man, I'm glad we didn't use every dollar we have, because now we can fit this guy under the contract. So that's a long-winded way of saying what you originally said. Be smart with your money.
And look, they should spend as much money as they can to improve the team. Be smart about it. I'm not a salary cap guru, so there's other people you could probably go to just for more clarity and exact numbers and exactly how things go. By the way, thanks to the listeners who are getting involved in the Q&A here in the mailbag. Sycamore D5 said salary cap's increasing 22 to 26 million. Go Niners. He just is excited about there's more money to spend. He doesn't even have a way he wants to send it. John in SoCal says large bump in the salary cap. Do you think the Niners try to fit Dahlman in? Shanahan used to love elite centers. Why has that changed? I want to come back to the center portion of that in a second. And some questions about Brock Purdy. What does this mean there? So when you and I compare contracts too with Brock Purdy, like this is why the contracts start to get so difficult, because if we say, Brock should get about what sounds right is Brock should get about what Tua should get, right? I'm not saying that Brock Purdy should get Tua plus 15% or whatever. The salary cap has gone up since then, right? Because all of a sudden, if you take 2 seasons worth of salary cap jumps from $50 million, well, now you're over $60 million per year. If you're comparing it to that, I'm not comparing it to that. I'm comparing it to the money now today. I'm saying you should pay Brock Purdy that money, not that money plus 20%. So I want to
not
get that
the same percentage against the cap at the time that contract was signed.
Right. And the agent would say the other thing, right? The agent would say, okay, give me your comps. Cool. Add 20%. Let's go. And the 49ers would be like, well, wait a second. Hold on a second. Well, and that's where this all gets very difficult. And yeah, percentage of the cap is kind of one of the big, probably really good metrics about what you're paying a guy. But at the same time, at the moment you sign them, but yeah. Anyway, it starts to get convoluted because there's so many different levers to pull, so many different ways you structure a contract, and none of these teams are going poor. So players should have every right to ask for the money that they're asking for with this thing too. And that's why I start talking about, look, man, if you're a good team with a lot of good players, you should be able to keep those good players, and the salary cap shouldn't come into the picture that much. But you also need to have a salary floor, so you can't have a team like the Oakland A's who are just leaving town and leaving their fans with nothing on the field to root for. And you can't have that sort of a situation either. And that's not really happening at all in the NFL. Everyone seems like is paying up to the cap as much as they possibly can. Drew Dahlman. What do you think about Drew Dahlman? Center is clearly a position that the 49ers can upgrade. Do you think center is where the 49ers should spend any extra free agent dollars? And by the way, it's not like the 49ers are like surprised that the cap is going up. Like everything's in the plans. Like for us, we get a new report. Hey, salary cap's going up $20 million. It's not like the teams thought, man, the salary cap might not go up this year. Oh, cool. It went up $20 million. Oh my God. Right. Like the teams know this. They know what's going on. The teams know what the salary cap is going to be in 3 years, let alone what's this year. So all these things are in the 49ers plans. All these things are not surprising to teams. Maybe you get a couple mil here and there, which isn't going to be a huge factor for what the process is. But if there is a little bit of money in free agency to add a player, Drew Dahlman is a really common name, I think partially because his dad played for the San Francisco 49ers. He's a good scheme fit. He's a guy we talked about here on the podcast.
Was it Chris Dahlman?
Chris Dahlman is his dad. Yeah, former 49er. And Drew Dahlman is the son who got drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. I thought he was an awesome fit at center for the 49ers. You think the 49ers should spend some free agent dollars on a true starting caliber player such as Drew Dahlman, the center from the Falcons?
Definitely. And that'll be something that the 49ers did before. Now, you took a swing with Richburg, Weston Richburg.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work, and for different reasons, whether it's injuries or whatnot, but that didn't work. But you saw what they were trying to do. And I see them go back in and kind of go back and do that same thing again. You just because it didn't work the first time doesn't mean, I can't go back to this. You need a veteran center. The 49ers, I think they put a lot on their center and their offensive line with different side adjustments and things. And, you want your center to be really smart. And one thing that we've talked about with him, he doesn't like young guys. He doesn't like, rookies. It's not like he's going to go draft or spend a lot of capital on the center. So if you can go and pay a little bit more for someone that is going to hold down that center spot, I think you do it because they've been kind of band-aided, put it like a band-aid over a wound with what they've done as of late at the center position. Go and get somebody that's going to play at a really high level, and if you got to pay a little bit more money for that, do that. Because if you have a good center, that's going to help your guards as well. Which we like Upati. Upati. Pooney. We like Dominic Pooney. Don't know exactly what's going to go on, what's going to happen at the left guard position, but you get a good center. It helps both of those guys. So I'm all for getting that veteran.
Next, I want to talk a little bit more about the quarterback position. Of course, the Brock Purdy contract is looming, and that negotiation, how's that going to go? But should the 49ers dip into the draft at quarterback? More draft questions as well, and a whole lot more on this offseason Q&A episode of Locked On 49ers. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back at all. And then it was waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes the individual, undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Let's talk a little quarterback here. I'm going to go to DVNNY on Twitter. He says, I think one thing this postseason showed us is quarterbacks who can't win or play good in horrible conditions won't go far in the playoffs. He's talked a little bit about climate change or whatever the reason is. I think some winters are harsher than others. Depends on what part of the country you're in as well. He thinks that harsher weather is coming more the norm in January. Is Brock Purdy capable of overcoming this kryptonite, or should the 49ers draft a QB? And we have another question here from Lee about drafting a quarterback. And he talks about Will Howard as one of the options. Should the 49ers be looking at a quarterback? I don't think they'd be looking at drafting a quarterback, Croc, though, that's replacing Brock Purdy. They would be drafting the quarterback that goes behind Brock Purdy.
Yeah, let's start with the inclement weather thing, especially with Brock Purdy. And because of where he plays and because of the division that the 49ers play in, and if you kind of think of some of the teams that we expect to kind of see in the postseason year in and year out, you don't see a whole lot of bad weather. Now, Philadelphia, it can get cold there for sure. Green Bay, they seem to find themselves in the postseason. It could get cold there. But I don't think it's like the AFC where like, dang, it kind of has to go through Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo. You're going to get really bad weather. Should Pittsburgh Steelers somehow make the playoffs every year, and they may randomly win the division, and you're going to have inclement weather there. But the NFC is not quite like that. Some of the teams that have been consistently solid, I named a couple, but then even aside from that, you got Detroit, who's been good lately. They're a dome team. You got the Dallas Cowboys, who always, they're kind of up and down, but they find themselves in the playoffs, and at times they can win that division. Play indoors as well. So when I think of Brock Purdy and playing in bad weather, I think it's more of a bad luck thing as opposed to something that you should have to prepare for with him. When I say bad luck, just randomly it's raining, or it might be one game this postseason where you may have to play outdoors. But for the most part, I don't think that's something that the 49ers should have to worry about when they're thinking about Brock Purdy in the future.
It's one of the reasons why, because I know a lot of fans love Brock Purdy, and they should, and Brock Purdy's awesome, and we talk about him being paid, and there'll be fans that'll argue, he's top 5. Brock Purdy's elite. He is top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Look at this metric. Look at this metric. Look at the 49ers do when he's in the game and how much they've won since he's been the 49ers quarterback. He's awesome, and he's a really good quarterback, and I like Brock Purdy a lot. But the reason I don't put him in the elite category is for that reason. And I wouldn't say necessarily it's his kryptonite, but we've seen him not throw the ball great in some bad weather and, some rain, some snow. The thing about Brock Purdy, and I always look at things with my scouting eye, and I try to take the fan out of it and be objective as possible and look at someone like Brock Purdy. And I think, man, if you're paying Brock Purdy the same amount of money or even a bigger percentage of your cap potentially that the team that's paying Lamar Jackson or obviously Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or whatever, and those guys are going to get new contracts at some point, and it's going to be over the top of everybody else. But if you're paying the same amount that the other team's paying that guy, then you're behind. And the reason is because of that, because Brock Purdy has a baseline arm that's just not quite what some other guys have. And Josh Allen can throw a ball late. Josh Allen can throw a ball that's wet. Josh Allen can just do some things that someone like Brock Purdy can. And when you look at Brock Purdy, okay, if he's just at the line or above the line, his arm is fine and he can make the throws he needs to make, but he needs to throw it with anticipation. So, okay, bad weather games, he might drop below that line a little bit, right? He's got multiple arm injuries now in his NFL career. He didn't finish the season this year, Croc. Okay, well, if his arm gets hurt, well, now is he below the line? Well, goes against the Vikings. They had a good game plan against you, and they're muddying the picture. He can't throw with anticipation. He drops below the line again. And if you start stacking these and like, okay, well, how many weeks now is potentially Brock Purdy going to fall below the line? And if he gets an arm injury, could he always just remain below the line? And we see quarterbacks. We saw it with Peyton Manning later in his career. And it's awesome that Brock Purdy's 25 years old, but when he's 32, is he still going to be throwing it as well as he does right now? Is he going to look like later career Drew Brees? Because Brock Purdy doesn't have the ability to lose arm from where he is right now. And if you slow down his process by good defense, we saw a few teams do that to the 49ers this year. Maybe the weapons aren't as good and aren't getting open, and he's not able to throw with the anticipation. You start to drop below the line. There's just more ways for Brock Purdy to fall below the line, even though most of the time he is above the line. And if that happens in January, now you're out of the playoffs. That's not elite quarterback and elite money that you want to pay for that quarterback, as good as Brock Purdy is, because you still need to build the elite thing around him. And so all these things, we're talking about salary cap, we're talking about conditions, and these things are all tied in together. But that's also to say that the 49ers aren't going to go out there and find a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. It's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. It's not going to be Kirk Cousins, and it's not going to be someone in the NFL draft. But you should definitely still trying to find the next Brock Purdy and draft a guy on day 3 and get a cheap backup to go with your really expensive starting quarterback. And who knows, maybe even find a guy who's even better than Brock Purdy, and you find the next Tom Brady in the 6th round, right? You should still keep looking and still draft and develop quarterbacks. And this is a really good draft to do that, because it's not a top-heavy drafted quarterback, but it's a deep drafted quarterback. So keep developing talent, and it's the most important position on the field. So yeah, draft a guy and develop it. I don't care. I'm not trying to draft a fullback or a special teams gunner on day 3 over a backup quarterback that potentially might need to start games for you sometime soon if your starter gets hurt.
The interesting thing when you said that, you're not drafting a player that's better than Brock Purdy, and because of how well Purdy has played, especially in this offense, in this system, it's like, yeah, but it's the weird thing is there are so many quarterbacks that'll probably be in this class that are more talented. So I think for the 49ers, it's, again, not trying to replace him, but can you find someone that is more talented that just has a knack for buying into the system the way that Brock has. And again, you're not trying to replace Brock, but finding someone that, okay, it could be worth having this guy as just our backup quarterback. I feel like they can do that. I think even with like Nick Mullins, there were times when Nick Mullins played and looks kind of good, right? I mean, I always reference that stat. There over the first 16 starts, nobody has, or only 2 people have thrown more yards than Nick Mullins, and it was like Peyton Manning and like Patrick Mahomes or something, right? Was it those 2 guys?
I think so, something like that. Yeah.
So you were able to get something out of a guy who, again, even if you watch him in college, not the most talented, he actually could move a little bit better than what it looked like at the NFL level. But I think the 49ers can find a guy, again, not better than, because there's more that goes into quarterbacking than just physical traits and talent, and that it's the mindset, it's the grittiness, it's the work ethic. And I think those are all areas where Brock Purdy clearly wins. Coming in confident, having control of a huddle, just those things where he just naturally, like, bro, I started for 4 years or 3.5 years in college. Like, I've been doing this. And he kind of stepped in with that confidence, and he's continued to have that kind of confidence. And that's what gives him the edge over other guys, as opposed to just being more talented. So you just kind of sparked a thought. But if I'm the 49ers, I'm not looking to replace him, but I'm definitely looking to bring somebody in to where, hey, if something happens or continues to kind of dip below that line, can I have somebody that I'm comfortable with? And I think the 49ers will structure his contract in a way to where it would make more sense for them if down the line they feel like they may have to move on.
Yeah. And look, a lot of people talk about Brock Purdy like right now that they talked about Jimmy Garoppolo a few years ago, so you want to go throw EPA out there. Well, it's the same thing for Jimmy Garoppolo too. And he was really efficient. And it's funny because Kyle Shanahan is, and I think it was Jason Lock-on-4 that reported this week, talking to executives and decision makers around the league. And they're like, man, Kyle Shanahan's cheat code is that he can run the ball with anybody, but then he goes out and pays the most for a running back, and he can get the most out of a quarterback, but then he's going to go out and pay the most for a quarterback. And then it's going to hamstring the rest of the team that he can build around that he can't create on his own. Like we start talking about pass protectors and start talking about defensive pieces. And so it's an interesting idea. And I don't disagree with that idea. And it's not to say the 49ers shouldn't sign Brock Purdy or should be trying to replace him. That's not the idea. The idea is, how much do you pay Brock Purdy? How much is he truly worth? And what is the delta if you had to go a different direction? And should the 49ers continue to try to develop another quarterback behind Brock Purdy? And I think the resounding answer to that last part is at least yes. I mean, you need a backup quarterback, and you need a cheap backup quarterback, because you're paying your quarterback $50+ million. You can't start paying $10 million a year for your backup quarterback. You start getting a little bit silly there.
You know what I would do? And again, this is not a knock on Brock Purdy. He has done an amazing job of making the most out of this situation for sure, and exceeded any and everyone's expectations except for maybe his own, because he is so confident. But I damn near, if I don't feel like I have the guy, right, I would just keep taking swings every year. Like every year I would just draft someone to see, like, are you somebody I can get by with and win with? Until I find the guy that is just like, this guy is, I don't know how he fell to us, but he is not replaceable.
That's how
the Baltimore Ravens with Joe Flacco, and it's like, Flacco's good, like, cool, Then it's like, oh, pick 31, let's trade up and get Lamar Jackson. And then Lamar Jackson was so good that it's like, oh, see, well, now we're good for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Well, and the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, they didn't need a quarterback. That was a shocker pick when they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round. They're like, what the heck, Jalen Hurts? You just drafted and signed a huge contract with Carson Wentz, and then Nick Foles, ends up winning the Super Bowl, and all of a sudden, this guy they drafted in the second round. They got him ready. They developed him. He sat for a while, and all of a sudden, now you got a Super Bowl quarterback. Let's talk more draft. We're getting into the Q&A. We got a lot more questions, and appreciate all the questions we're getting to. We're not going to get to all of them, but we got a few more talking NFL draft here and next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off, You can bet on that fourth quarter comeback. You can stay in the action however you want, whether it's live game plays, maybe you stack those plays with live games. Because if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay. NBA, Major League Baseball action, got the college tournament coming up. And yeah, you can still bet on the NFL as well. Tons of NFL futures and NFL draft props at FanDuel. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today or download the app. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
So, Peacock, real quick, guy, this is one of the questions, and we weren't expecting to answer this one, but I'm going to put you on the spot. At pick 11, Will Campbell or Walter Nolan?
With the information I have today, Walter Nolan. I think the combine is super important for Will Campbell because I need to know if he's a tackle or a guard. And if he's got 32.5-inch arms, he's an interior guy all day long. If it's 33.5, 34, we can start talking about offensive tackle, and that massively changes the value. And we've talked about, I think there was a question about Will Johnson, the cornerback, right? Out of Michigan. Yeah. If the 49ers should look to him. And I believe the question had something to do with Robert Saleh because they had Sauce Gardner over there in New York. And if the right fit potentially for the 49ers. And it's 49ers take.
Here's the question. Yeah. Here's the question from 49er Takes. He says, do you think Saleh sees shades of Sauce Gardner and Will Johnson's game? Do you see them picking him at 11? Now, the first part is, do you see shades of the game? I think just watching the film, at least so far, the only thing that's really comparable to between the two guys is that they're both tall corners. But their play, like if you go back and you watch Sauce Gardner at Cincinnati, he was a press man guy. And he was long, he was athletic, he had good fluidity for his height and his length. And their games, or at least what they've put on film, are completely opposite. Matter of fact, Will Johnson, his film is that of someone that's typically like a 5'10", 190-pound corner. Like just a lot of off, playing with your feet, turn and run. It's not that of someone you would expect to see or you would expect to see him at the line of scrimmage, getting hands on guys, getting physical, and that's just not what you see in film. So if you're asking if you see shades of Sauce Gardner, it would be a lot of them projecting, because that's not really what we saw in film.
It's so important, the combine, to really solidify, Tet McMillan. We talked about him on yesterday's show. And if you because sometimes it's just hard to tell on film, and you think a guy's pretty fast. It's like you just want to see that checkbox. You need that box to be checked. And for Will Campbell, arm length, it's a box that needs to be checked. Is he a tackle or not? Is Will Johnson, can he fly? Does he look really quick in those drills when you put all these corners next to each other and you can check that box? And you'd be like, no, I'm comfortable, man, because he's so smooth with it out there, and he can play off, he can play zone, and we're totally confident he can shut down guys. And man, he's got this length, and the way he plays and how he plays smart. Like, yeah, he's a stud, and he's going to go top 10. Tet McMillan, he can go out there and run well, and then you're like, okay, no questions here. He's a top 10 lock. He's top 5 lock potentially going to the New England Patriots at 4 if he runs well. And so I think there's a lot of guys where you don't want to overrate the combine, but it's just the evaluation's not done, and they have boxes that are left to check. Some of these like speed rushing guys, how big are they? Because if you're 6'2", 245 or something like that, some teams are flat out not going to draft you, especially in the first round, and maybe not even the first 3 rounds, to be you'd just be a designated edge, rotational rusher at that point for certain schemes in the NFL. So you got to prove that you have the size and still maintain your athletic ability that you showed on the field. Someone like Jalen Walker, someone like James Pierce. Can James Pierce show up at 255 pounds? And that would be like, okay, because he's listed like 242 or something like that. Like, okay, you can be big and strong and be a legit defensive end for us. That changes things. So that's where the combine starts to become really important for a lot of guys, is just checking that last box. You're not changing your evaluation, but where you can finally put a guy on your draft board because you have a few more answers to the test, so to speak.
There was one question that we started to answer some of it as it pertained to Brock Purdy and the inclement weather and the issues and whatnot. There was a second part to one of those questions where someone, and I'm pulling it up right now. We got Lee. Lee Deal says, should the 49ers be looking at a quarterback like Will Howard, who looks like he'll continue to improve as a quarterback? And yeah, that's the type of guy. If I'm the 49ers, that's the guy I'm looking at. Like, I don't need a quarterback, but man, can we get a long-term backup quarterback with a comp pick in the third round? They've done a lot worse with comp picks, so I don't think it should be a waste. But Will Howard, championship quarterback. I love the offense that they were running with Chip Kelly. There were a lot of creativity with it in the way that they were, utilizing some of their weapons and their receivers and getting the ball in guys' hands in space, and watching Will Howard just kind of orchestrate that. Like, he didn't have to be everything to Ohio State. He just had to, understand what they were trying to do offensively, execute that at a high level, hand the ball off to those two terrific running backs. And I mean, if the 49ers are like, hey, well, that's what we ask of our quarterbacks as well, then he is a good fit. And I think he did that at a high level.
This one from Matt, it goes along the same lines of the expensive quarterback thing. And he says, given the Purdy contract, how aggressive do you expect the Niners to be in free agency? Surely see a change in approach and avoid expensive free agents when revamping the O and D lines. And yeah, that's where it starts to get very difficult. Can you continue to pay guys? Can you pay Brock Purdy and then bring in someone like Drew Dahlman, even with the cap going up? And the 49ers, don't want to spend to the cap because they always want to have money to roll back over the next year. Don't forget that. If you see 49ers have $50 million in salary cap space, they're going to spend $50 million. No, they're not, because they're going to want to roll a lot of money over into next year. And that's been their strategy, to keep rolling money over. And don't forget, they're putting a lot on credit cards already. I think they're number 2 in the NFL. I think I have it right here. Let me see if I can find it. I believe the Philadelphia Eagles are number 1 and the 49ers are number 2 in future contract dollars that are currently in void years. Yeah, here it is. The most cap dollars currently in void years in the NFL. Number 1 is the Philadelphia Eagles, have $390 million that are currently in void year contracts. The San Francisco 49ers are second, and it's almost half of what the Eagles are at, way out there at number 1. The 49ers have $204 million in void year money. And so what that is, and look, that's going to grow for the 49ers because they're about to put some more void years undoubtedly on a huge contract for Brock Purdy. So let's say Brock Purdy signs a 4-year contract. Well, they slap 3 more years of void years onto that contract, and so that they can spread that cap hit over more years. Now, Brock Purdy's contract doesn't go through the 7 years, so when he's done in 4 years, now you have all of that money that was pushed to the back end of the contract that was spread over the life of the contract with signing bonuses and things. Now that money you're paying for nobody to be on the roster. And so the 49ers are already number 2 in the league, and that's only going to go up with a huge quarterback contract, the biggest contract, like potentially nearly double the biggest contract they've ever done. Nick Bosa is the biggest contract the 49ers have ever done in the organization's history. And he's making $30 million a year? And we're talking maybe 60 million. Like, we're talking about almost a doubling what the biggest contract previously was in 49ers history with Brock Purdy's next contract. So there's going to be more money in void years. And so you're definitely putting money on the credit card here. And so the 49ers might say, well, we're already doing it. Let's go all the way with it and do everything we can and keep adding money to the future and try to win right now and worry about paying that bill later. And the salary cap going up with the level it is kind of helps teams like the 49ers to be able to stay under the cap and have a little bit more breathing room and operating room. So when it comes to the cap, I think that's what it is for the 49ers. Good that it's going up. They have a nice little bit of breathing room, but it's not going to fundamentally change anything because their plans were already their plans, and they already had a good beat on what this salary cap is going to be years in advance. I think that's it. That's all we got time for. Appreciate all the questions. We will get to more next week, no doubt. So keep hitting us with those topics and questions and any of your hot takes that you'd like us to respond to this offseason at BD Peacock, at Crocky209, or drop it in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. Croc and I back next time right here. Locked On 49ers.